about her later.
Jill is introduced boobs first.
No, she's not, Skippy. You're the one who introduces Jill like that. Since you want to lie to your audience, I'll show the full scene. Already you're starting this video with scene manipulation.
Oddly, this is only the second worst Resident Evil game that takes place on a ship. That honor goes to Resident Evil Dead Aim.
So what about Resident Evil Gaiden? Sure, it was non-canon, but was that game better than Dead Aim? Also, the way you're saying worst Resident Evil game implies that this game is bad. Your opinion and those of others who share it are your own opinions for sure, but the overall reception of this game was positive.
Yeah, it's a boat, Jill. It's actually not that impressive.
Yo, do you even listen to yourself? In the sin I just covered, you correctly called it a ship, and now you're incorrectly calling it a boat. This is a ship. This is a boat.
Take us around. Let's find a boarding point.
Or maybe you should do what everyone at sea would do and first try to establish radio contact with the crew.
That possibly could have been done before Jill and Parker arrived. We're not given enough information. However, as we come to learn that there is no human life on board besides Raymond and Rachel, if Jill and Parker did try that now before boarding the ship, then they wouldn't have gotten a response anyway.
94 minutes since Chris and Jessica dropped off the radar.
But the interpolation from their last known coordinates puts them
Right here on this ship.
Unless this boat was unmoved by the wind and waves, there is no way this is Chris's last known location due to interpolated data. Also, later we find out Chris was hiking through a snowfield on a mission in Finland. So how the hell do they figure Chris got all the way from Finland to the Mediterranean in 94 minutes?
This one is a little tricky for me, I admit, but according to the game, the coordinates that Jill and Parker receive are from Chris's transponder, and those coordinates suddenly put him on the Queen Zenobia. It's pretty clear that these signals are being hijacked and manipulated to appear elsewhere. Also, you said,
so how the hell do they figure,
but the subtitle didn't match.
Jill and Parker lifted this floor grate due to a blinking light they saw inside. Once they open it, the blinking light is gone, and I'm not even sure where it was coming from, since guns and severed arms do not normally come with LEDs.
Dude, that's for the benefit of the player.
Where did you pull that scanner from? Need I remind you, you are wearing a wetsuit that doesn't leave much to the imagination.
Ignoring the comment about the scanner, because this is a gameplay trope and this isn't the only game in the series with things like this, wetsuits are form-fitting, so yes, in a way, they don't leave much to the imagination. And for those who are curious, there's a link in my description explaining why wetsuits are meant to be form-fitting.
Sure. Reach your unprotected hand down into that massive gore. You are only looking into a possible act of bioterrorism after all.
Yeah, but she scanned that massive gore beforehand with the Genesis, which means she reached in knowing it was safe.
Even the monsters in this game want to stare at Jill's ass.
Actually, I would argue it's a large number of players that would be interested in Jill's ass.
I mean, her butt, it's just so big. I can't believe it's just so round. It's like out there, I mean.
Now, the perspective we see is just the ooze emerging from its hiding place, and we're seeing its POV right before it attacks. Jill's beautiful rear end just happens to be in the said POV.
I like big butts and I cannot lie. You other brothers can't deny.
This room was empty a second ago, but that doesn't stop this thing from appearing behind Jill.
Okay, this one is especially annoying because it really illustrates how easy it is to debunk these sins, further proving my point that these videos treat the audience like idiots. The ooze came from the open vent that was behind where Ms. Valentine was standing. Just because you're playing to be stupid to try and make it look like you have a point, doesn't mean you actually have a point.
Let's talk about the enemy design in this game. It's bad.
To you and several others, maybe. But to the majority of people who played and enjoyed this game, no. And by the way, it looks like you played this game on PC. I'm not sure if you're aware of mods, but sometimes using mods can significantly change an experience of a game. Look at this one that the creator Cerberus created for the Ooze Enemies.
This is not good.
Thanks, Jill, for your brilliant tactical analysis.
Thanks, Dartigan, for explaining why you're giving this a sin exactly. Sure, her choice of dialogue isn't very original, but there's different ways to interpret what she's saying. For instance, Jill saying this is her realizing that there's a viral outbreak on this ship.
The Exposition News Network would like to remind you that it is still the most trusted source for overwrought backstory narration.
So what if it's exposition that gives us backstory? This is an attempt to give the player story details to help the plot make sense. You'd probably sin the game if it didn't try and hold your hand anyway.
In 2004, Veltro, a terrorist group opposing the city's development, launched a bioterrorist attack.
Whom you've never heard of before, because each new Resident Evil game these days has to have its own virus and villain organization that's different from the previous game rather than build on established lore.
How is this not building on established lore? And what even are you asking for? Are you asking that the creative team behind the installments of these games constantly recycle the same creature designs and use them over and over and over? Also, who the hell else would you suggest be the antagonist of each installment? Albert Wesker was still alive during the events of this game, but he can't be involved with every viral outbreak. And if you haven't noticed, almost every antagonist in each installment dies at the end of each game.
Veltro, a terrorist group opposing the city's development, launched a bioterrorist attack.
Well, they had 11 years to attack this place if they were against it. Development would have started in 1994, but these terrorists waited until after it was complete.
Not exactly. Veltro protested the city since its inception, and it's only after their leader met with Morgan Lansdale that the terrorists were provided with the materials they needed in order to carry out their attack.
This launched one of the worst tragedies the world has ever seen.
Except for Raccoon City, which was destroyed just a few years ago in this timeline. Would the world be so quick to forget the nuking of an American city infected by zombies?
What the hell do you mean? I'm fairly certain that certain people in this world, and even in this game, have not forgotten about Raccoon City. All the news anchor said was that this was a great tragedy that led to the destruction of an entire city and the deaths of countless people. Kind of like Raccoon City.
The FBC, the world's leading counter-bioterror organization operating under the auspices of the US, was called in to direct efforts to contain the attack.
Why would a city in the Mediterranean call in a US task force? That's more of a problem for the EU or NATO. In fact, the city of Terragrigia almost seems to be US territory considering the people who live there and who was in control of it.
Okay, this first one is a lot, so strap in, boys and girls. First, although it was founded by the US government, the FBC will in certain situations work with other countries against biological threats that pose a danger to the public. Now, after some digging around in the game's files, I found this article that says that the FBC is the primary organization that will handle operations in the event of bioterrorism. This document reveals during the construction of the city, there was a treaty signed over Terragrigia's governance, and it was agreed the US will have the foremost anti-bioterrorism group in the world at the time in place to take charge in the event of a crisis. And second, not exactly. Terragrigia was built in conjunction between the US and countries in Europe. Italy likely had a major hand in this. The US definitely had interest there, but the city wasn't a territory of the US alone. The ones in control were of joint US and European leaders.
Realizing the need for immediate and decisive action, Supreme Local Headquarters issued the order to use the city's solar energy matrix on itself.
Seriously, who controlled this city with a giant space station that can melt cities? That's a weapon of mass destruction right there.
Agreed that it's a weapon of mass destruction, but to clarify, it's not intended to be one. It's not a giant space station, it's basically a satellite that helps to supply the city with its power since it relies on solar energy. And the one who was behind this decision was Morgan Lansdale.
The FBC announced it has successfully disbanded the terrorist group.
Don't you mean kill or arrest?
No. The news anchor said disbanded, which means to break apart. And the FBC probably kept details like that a secret from the public, considering their leader worked with the leader of Veltro.
It is now 2005.
It's always nice when the news reminds you of what year it is, just in case you forgot or happen to be a time traveler.
Right. This coming from the same guy who said Resident Evil 4 took place in 2005.
And a sense of calm and security is finally returning to the people.
1 year after a terrible viral outbreak and destruction of a city by space laser, the people are reassured that all is well.
Okay, why is that a sin? The fact that there's been some peace in between the events of the Terragrigia panic and the events of this game is a bad thing because...
As you can see, the lost city of Terragrigia remains inaccessible.
That's not what Lost City means. It's right there. You are standing in front of it. Ruined or destroyed is a term you were looking for.
Really? We're nitpicking that hard, are we? Okay, this I found after a simple Google search for synonyms on the word lost.
What kind of news station is this that ends the report by taking the entire channel off the air and replacing it with static?
I'm pretty sure that was a stylistic choice made by the game designers.
I assume you both know that the FBC has cordoned off the entire area.
If you assume that, then you don't even need to state this. Just get to the point.
Again, that's for the benefit of the player.
Normally in games when the devs create a bullet sponge enemy, they don't create an actual sponge.
This design fits with the aquatic themes of this game when you look at it. Hell, it reminds me of this.
Jill, you are all too eager to reach your bare hand into potentially infectious heaps of monster flesh, and this one just tried to eat you.
I admit the point you made and the one I'm about to make can honestly go either way, but I'll still throw this out here. Yes, it does seem careless that Jill would just put herself at risk like this, especially since we learned that some of these carcasses are in fact still alive, but to give the game some merit, you need to actually walk away from this first carcass towards the other end of the beach to encounter the first one that actually moves. If you just stay in the immediate area where Director O'Brien is and scan this carcass, then you'll just get this scene. So what this means is depending on what the player actually does, do we learn sooner or later that some of these carcasses are still alive.
That beach tumor just happened to have a vial of T-Abyss virus inside of it for future evidence. What are the odds?
It's a video game, buddy. Like movies, coincidences are everywhere. Also, the odds are not as low as you're trying to paint it. These carcasses are more than likely mutated members of Veltro that were washed away from the Queen Dido, which isn't far from where the BSAA are currently standing. Though we're not told exactly where this sample came from, it could have come from there, or it was in the possession of one of these Veltro members before he was infected and mutated into this monster.
Is the earpiece you're wearing just for show? Because you're using your phone instead of it?
You get off on lying to your audience with scene manipulations, don't you? You skip the part that would have provided context to debunk this sin. O'Brien says,
Huh? It's the emergency line.
That headset likely wasn't meant to function with that emergency line.
We lost contact with Chris and Jessica.
The signal was lost over the ocean.
Does the fact that they lost contact while in Finland and somehow traveled to the Mediterranean in no time seem strange at all to you?
Your first discussion point is definitely a good point to start with, but the fact of the matter is that would have been something the BSAA would have worried about later. They assumed that Chris and Jessica were in trouble. If your best friend was suspected to be in danger, would you waste time figuring out the how and why portion before you prioritize their safety first?
You hear that? Was that the lock?
Locks have a habit of unlocking after they know the cutscene is over.
Or, Raymond could have been deliberately waiting and watching for the perfect time to unlock that door.
There is not one female character in this game that wears a non-sexy wetsuit.
Compared to Jessica and Rachel, I would say that Jill's wetsuit is modest. Also, as I mentioned before, a wetsuit is form-fitting. In Jill's case, since she is very physically attractive, that wetsuit is going to show off her form.
Chris?
That's about as expressive as the real Chris, actually.
Chris hate number 1.
It was Veltro's plan to lure Jill and Parker here using a fake Chris, then knock them out. If they needed Jill and Parker to enter the cell holding the dummy Chris, why did they lock it and force them to hunt down the key? Veltro needed them inside before springing their trap.
It's possible that the room being locked wasn't originally intended, seeing as how Rachel had the key for this room. Hell, then again, maybe that was intended, to lure them both to the room at the same time in order for them to fall victim to the trap.
Jessica is introduced to Ass first. Unless this game gives us a close-up of Chris's crotch bulge soon, there is no way to make up for the eye candy deficit.
No way to make up for the eye candy deficit? I guess you didn't unlock Chris's sailor outfit then.
Feet are killing me.
Probably because you're wearing heels in snow underneath those leg warmers.
Possible, but some women are comfortable wearing heels, so it could have been the hike that she took with Chris that made her feet hurt. Oh, and that's not the right heels, buddy.
Chris, roll your damn sleeves down when it's cold. Just because you have boulder punching arms doesn't mean we need to see them.
I believe that's called fan service. It's a concept that flies over your head quite often. There are people who think Chris is one of the more attractive male video game characters, and there are more women playing video games these days. So, why not give them some fan service too?
Maybe it's the weather, but I still can't make contact with HQ.
How did Veltro plan for this fake Chris plan in the first place? Chris is out of radio contact due to the weather, which is not something you can exactly plan for. Jill would never have been sent to the Queen Zenobia had Chris been able to call in.
I'm sure that it was Director O'Brien who planned that, not Veltro.
This was a plane crash. The only way that dead body could fall through the door like that is if the guy was leaning against it when he died.
We've reached next level absurdity, ladies and gentlemen. This dude says this crap while showing the scene where that's exactly what happens. I'm not letting this stupidity slide easy. 10 sins.
They were headed for Valkoinen Airport.
If that's where they are, this mine should take us there.
Mines don't lead to airports. In fact, they don't lead anywhere. A mine is just a hole in the ground. What you were describing is a tunnel.
If this mine didn't lead them to their destination, then why did it leave them very close to their destination?
Also, Jessica just said there were no shipping routes in the area when she saw the plane crash.
There shouldn't be any shipping routes in this area.
Yet here is an airport just across the mountain from where the plane went down.
Are you even paying attention, for fuck's sake? Jessica said there shouldn't be any shipping routes, not there aren't any shipping routes.
There shouldn't be any shipping routes in this area.
You'd be at least a little more efficient if you actually paid attention to what the characters are saying. Also, you said,
Jessica just said there were no shipping routes in the area when she saw the plane crash.
But the subtitles again didn't match. How difficult is it really to make sure that the words displayed on screen match the words that come out of your mouth?
No, I'm not into slut shaming, but if I were, Jessica would be exactly the sort of slut I'd shame.
Sinning characterization. Need I remind you, characterization is not a goddamn sin.
I could give this shot the benefit of the doubt if this was any other game, but here the camera is not so much establishing Jill as it is leering at her while she is unconscious.
The concept of fan service just goes...
What was the point of knocking Jill and Parker out? All Veltro did was disarm them and lock them in separate bedrooms with their radios, only for Jill and Parker to reunite, retrieve their weapons, and continue doing what they had been doing before they were knocked out.
The real point of this segment was to make it a tense moment for the player. BOWs were in almost every room, and having nothing to defend yourself with greatly increases tension as you make your way to retrieving your equipment. Because this is Resident Evil. This is survival horror. Remember?
Introduction by standoff cliché. Admittedly, this is a very Resident Evil only cliché, but this exact same scene plays out in just about every Resident Evil game.
Bullshit. In just about every Resident Evil game, huh? I don't recall that happening with Ada Wong's introduction in Resident Evil 2.
Who is that?
Stay sharp.
Lower it. FBI.
Sorry. Thank you for your help.
Or Louis Serra's introduction in Resident Evil 4.
Little rough, don't you think?
Dartigan, if you're going to make a bold claim, I urge you to have some merit, even if you don't know what the f*** you're talking about.
Parker. Who the hell are you?
How the hell could you ever fail to recognize someone you once knew with hair like that? It's like Capcom mistakenly used a JoJo's Bizarre Adventure character in their game.
I would imagine that the reason Parker couldn't instantly tell is due to presumed darkness in the area, as well as not seeing Raymond's face from the get-go.
The city of Terragrigia must have had a strict building code, since they built this exact same building 10 different times. Also, I'm assuming those are solar panels on the top slope, which makes them very ineffective since many of them are angled away from the sun.
Now I could be wrong about this, but it's possible that this is the design that was decided upon since the city relies on solar energy, and they were built this way to harness that form of energy. With that said, how the f*** are they angled away from the sun? I can't even believe I have to say this, but the sun's rays shine down towards the surface. Did you take a stupid pill while writing this script or something?
Obliterating the site by satellite is only a quick fix. We could lose crucial evidence.
Use of the satellite has already been approved. We can clean up this mess.
I have to agree with Morgan, the villain of this game. Torching this city with a space laser sounds reasonable given the situation, but the game treats this as if it were the wrong thing to do.
Okay, so if you agree with this method, why are you sinning it? This is just a case of you sinning something you like. If you do this again...
Raccoon City all over again.
Every Resident Evil game is apparently required to compare its setting to Raccoon City with this line.
Even if what you're saying is true, you're playing a game that's part of a series that involves a viral outbreak and most of the area's inhabitants being infected, and you need to survive. Resident Evil 2 was a pinnacle of the series, so of course you'll see things like dialogue that references that game and especially Raccoon City. And for the record, not every game can or does compare its setting to Raccoon City.
Answer me, Raymond.
I don't have to answer anything.
Considering you brought them here to learn the truth, you should answer their questions. Hell, you should have just sent them an email detailing everything they needed to know about the Terragrigia incident and saved everyone's time. It's not like Jill is new to this.
Emailing them couldn't be done. Remember, O'Brien knows there's a mole in the BSAA trying to erase all evidence of Morgan's involvement with Veltro. He explains this later in the game.
Raymond realized that Morgan was not who he seemed. So we set this trap together. The whole Veltro revival act.
The mountain hideout, and the coordination of the ships. All to put heat on Morgan? But sir, couldn't you have at least told us?
I couldn't risk it. Not with a mole inside the BSAA. My apologies.
Here's another example of a scene that plays out in every one of these games. A character who is being held at gunpoint casually walks away and the good guys do nothing to stop him.
Motherfucker, are you out of your damn mind?
That has got to be the most ridiculous claim in this entire video. I've played several games of this franchise beginning to end, and I can easily say that this does not happen in Resident Evil Code Veronica, Resident Evil 4, Resident Evil 5, Resident Evil Revelations 2, Resident Evil, Resident...
But if my words be seed that may bear fruit of infamy to the traitor whom I know, speaking and weeping shalt thou see together.
He's quoting Dante.
This game is fixated on the Divine Comedy, so much so that multiple characters quoted at every opportunity. However, I'm not really seeing the connection this game is trying to make between itself, a game about anti-terrorists fighting sea zombies, and a work of classic literature. I suppose since Norman is quoting a passage about traitors in the deepest circle, you could consider that the connection since he was betrayed by Morgan and left at the bottom of the ocean, but that doesn't explain why every other character is obsessed with Dante.
The Divine Comedy is referenced heavily in this game, and one reason being is Veltro believes society has degraded into a living version of the 9 circles. There are also enemies in this game that are named after demons from Dante's Inferno. Example, there's the Malacoda, the penultimate boss of this game. In Dante's Inferno, this demon was the leader of the Malebranche, the 12 demons who guard Bolgia 5 of Malebulge, the 8th circle of hell. And it makes some sense as the final enemy you face is Jack Norman, the leader of Veltro, underwater. Maybe representing the 9th level of hell? Themes and symbolism, man.
I knew it was Veltro.
What clued you in? The giant flag with the words Veltro you spotted over the airbase?
Way to misunderstand, smartass. Although Jessica and Chris's investigation in Finland gave them enough evidence to believe Veltro had in fact returned, we later learned this isn't the case. This false broadcast is to further sell that lie which everyone, including Jessica based on the scene you showed, is buying.
Cleavage, heels. I'm just surprised these girls are not carrying specialty Louis Vuitton wetsuit bags into combat.
The way you're saying these girls implies you're trying to include someone other than Jessica in your criticism, and I'm afraid that Jill and Rachel don't qualify for heels.
I don't see a thing. I thought the Mediterranean was just like a big lake.
What Jessica lacks in common sense, she makes up for in... Oh, wait. Also, why are they blindly looking for the Queen Zenobia? Jill and Parker had exact coordinates to it, and the ship hasn't moved since then, since it is dead in the water.
Funny. But I believe this is part of Jessica's facade, as she's the mole within the BSAA. Also, what makes you think they're blindly looking for the Zenobia? I'm fairly certain the pilot flying this helicopter has the coordinates, and he's flying towards that location.
The whole ship's out of power. The ship's running on emergency power. But the comm system needs the main power.
Why would the ship's communication not be running on the emergency power system? In an emergency at sea, you are going to want communications.
I'm not an expert at this, but a possibility is that the emergency power system does not provide enough power to run the communication system. You see why you shouldn't present a question with no answer as something wrong with this game?
Straight into the depths of hell.
Game, you are not even Army of Darkness, let alone the Divine Comedy.
It's called Symbolism. You've already tried criticizing characterization. Don't tell me Symbolism is something wrong also.
Follow Jessica home. You know where she lives now?
Almost. I had her until the very end, but I lost her near the... Hey!
How did these two characters end up in the game? These two are the most out-of-place characters in the entire series.
And here we are, a new cliché born. Dartigan, sin something he likes cliché. And for context...
Wow, that sounds like a job for us, don't it, Grinder?
I'm gonna take a sin off for my ironic liking of a shit character and moment in the game because I can. At least Jackass and Grinder have fun hemming it up.
That's why I sinned him.
Bright out for this time of night. I guess that's why they call it the Midnight Sun.
Judging by the name of this airbase and the remark about the Midnight Sun, I can only assume this is somewhere in Finland. And this is the same place where Chris fell out of radio contact for a few hours. And then HQ was fooled into believing he made it all the way to the Mediterranean, which is nowhere near Finland. And then later Chris and Jessica do make it all the way to the Mediterranean from here in a short amount of time.
Okay, what the hell does any of that bullshit involving Chris and Jessica now have to do with this scene involving these two characters? I don't get the parallels you're trying to draw here at all, besides the fact they're in the same location as before. Keith and Quint are simply picking up where Chris left off when he was here.
This radar terminal on the crash plane still works and has power, and somehow is tracking a ship in the Mediterranean Sea from Finland. Thank God for astronomically large miracles.
Actually, you should thank the game's writers.
Jessica's wetsuit looks like the sexy alternative outfit you would normally unlock after beating the game.
Agree with that statement. However, the reason she's likely wearing something like this is because she wants to bang Chris. She's trying pretty damn hard to get his attention if you hadn't noticed.
Nobody home.
Where'd you go, Jill?
Did you ever stop to read the name on the ship's bow before boarding? How do you board the wrong ship?
It's pretty obvious they were tricked, and they likely pushed ahead due to the coordinates they received that put Jill and Parker's location here on this ship. That's probably why they didn't even bother checking for those details.
Now that the head fake of Chris appearing to come to the rescue only to board the wrong ship is over, let's easily save ourselves like we could have all along.
Showing a scene of the player in a scripted section of Jill improvising to save herself and Parker from drowning, and calls it easily saving herself like she could have all along.
Damn it, I don't have a signal. Maybe the antenna array is out.
It's on the observation deck. Maybe we can fix it.
The entire premise of this game hinges on the loss of radio contact. First, Jill and Parker get tricked into boarding this ship after Chris and Jessica lost contact. Then after Jill and Parker lose radio contact, Chris and Jessica had to do the same thing. Can someone in this game carry a satellite phone for God's sake?
But how would that help? You already noted that a theme in this game which is common in this series is the lack of radio communications.
Was there a sale on Amazon for this book?
What the hell does that have to do with this game? I believe Capcom was simply trying to flat out say that this game makes references to the Divine Comedy, and there are other references and themes about it found throughout the game.
O'Brien keeps a photo on his desk of the man he knows is evil and is personally trying to bring down.
This photo suggests that before O'Brien and Lansdale were at odds, they were either good friends or respectable colleagues. Maybe O'Brien keeps this as a painful reminder of more peaceful times. We're not given enough information to conclusively come to this point, but I'm giving this scene more thought than you are.
Good thing Jill can assemble a drone and its launcher that she's never worked with before in just a few minutes. It took me over an hour to put together a standing desk once.
How do you know she hasn't worked on something similar like this before? The game is establishing right here that she can assemble this drone. So you saying she's never worked on this before is as pointless as this sin.
Abandon hope, all ye who enter here.
I have a Dante quote for you. There is no greater sorrow than to recall happiness in times of misery.
You can shit on this game all you want, but like I mentioned before, the majority of gamers and series fans really like this entry. And this game did better as far as its reception than both Resident Evil 6 and Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City, which released after this game did.
You two used a helicopter to get to the wrong ship earlier. What happened to that? You could have avoided all the tentacles around the Queen Zenobia. And why didn't these things attack Jill and Parker when they showed up?
The reason Chris and Jessica are going by boat is explained during the gameplay. Also, I doubt that they could have avoided those tentacles since they do attack Jill and Chris when they're in a helicopter later on. Besides, it's a game. Action set pieces are set up like this in order to give the player something to do other than watch a cutscene. Also,
and why didn't these things attack Jill and Parker when they showed up?
Well, I'll answer that final question with a couple of questions. Why didn't Wesker just release the Tyrant in Resident Evil 1 from the start? Why didn't William Birkin just appear from the very beginning in Resident Evil 2? These questions are meant to illustrate that there are certain elements at play here, similar to movies for instance. Setup and payoff is one, and there's also the simple idea of grandeur when revealing a powerful new enemy, and this works better introducing them at later stages in a game after building things up. Think back to the Regenerator in Resident Evil 4.
This game has no shame. None.
I think you mean Jessica, not the game. She was written that way, so it's part of her characterization. Characterization is not a goddamn sin.
You stopped the Regia Solis. Now I will reveal what I know.
Could have done that hours ago before Jill and Parker almost died several times. I mean, this ship was almost destroyed with you on it. Why did they need to aimlessly walk around the ship for hours doing repairs until you decided to show up and tell them something?
I'm not sure if you're feigning ignorance or you just didn't pay attention to the explanation later on about Raymond and O'Brien working together in order to expose Lansdale's involvement with Terragrigia. Granted, Raymond doesn't outright say this before Jessica shoots him, but he does heavily and correctly imply that someone is trying to cover their tracks. Also, Raymond outright tells Parker about a mole in the BSAA. This mole could have compromised what Raymond and O'Brien were trying to accomplish, hence all the mystery.
Consider this. First, why did it take till now to find the Queen Zenobia? How was it able to float around the Mediterranean undetected?
Could you stop sending this stupid plot? That's my job.
He's actually answering some of the questions from your previous sin. Since you're just letting that fly over your head and not omitting the previous sin for you.
And that...
Holy shit, someone finally did it. Shot a person in the middle of narrating when they were held at gunpoint. I had to take a sin off for that first.
Okay, but there was an actual reason for this. Jessica is the traitor. She shot Raymond to keep him from talking. Didn't you play this game to the end? Shouldn't you know this? Oh, that's right. You're gonna play dumb as usual.
Why did you fire?
Yeah, why did you shoot the terrorist? Protocol clearly states you only point your gun at him in a threatening way until he walks away and you do nothing to try and stop him. Amateur.
You do realize Raymond wasn't posing an immediate threat to Jill and Parker, and Jill and Parker both had their guns trained on him, right? Besides, I'm fairly certain that when it comes to arresting terrorists or suspects, law enforcement will usually try and take in the suspect for questioning first. Jessica reminds me of those trigger-happy fools who shoot and sometimes kill unarmed people, but that's another story.
I'm not surprised Raymond was the one in the gas mask. I'm more surprised he could keep his hair looking like that while wearing a gas mask.
Sure you knew Raymond was posing as his Veltro agent. Sure you did.
If I'm being too do-goody by harping on how blatantly over-sexualized Jessica is as a character, it's because the game gives me no choice. Her casting credit might as well be thought.
Nah, bruh. Quit while you're ahead. As for Jessica, the sudden movement caught her by surprise, and she likely just didn't want to bust her ass. Besides, even if she intended to do that, it's already been well established that this woman is pretty much catapulting herself at Chris. I can assure you, when a woman's into you, she'll do stuff like this, or more.
This works anywhere, even underwater.
Don't put it in your pocket though, it's covered in spikes. A pretty big design flaw when you think about it.
Which does not matter because in gameplay, it's pulled out of nowhere. A gameplay trope that has existed for decades. You did the same thing with the Genesis. Suspend disbelief and move on. You're playing a video game.
Director O'Brien, I think I put it all together. Veltro was never back in action. It was all smoke and mirrors, orchestrated by yourself.
Your own little Veltro production, all to get into the head of one certain somebody.
If you wanted to look into Morgan, you could have just ordered Chris and the others to investigate directly, not set up an elaborate plot to get them all on a boat, just so they could slowly learn what you already knew, that Morgan was behind the Terragrigia attack.
Jesus Christ. I swear I'm going to sound like a broken record by the end of this rant. Jessica was a mole in the BSAA. Openly investigating Morgan could have reached her ears and then likely have failed, especially if Morgan knows of something coming directly at him. And the elaborate plot was not only to tell the agents involved of this revelation, but also an attempt to gather incriminating evidence in order to then prosecute Morgan directly. To quote Denzel Washington's Oscar-winning performance in Training Day,
"It's not what you know, it's what you can prove."
If you were going to make a deadly virus to destroy mankind, maybe don't make a vaccine for it.
Think about it. Morgan has both the virus and the vaccine for it. He could engineer another incident like Terragrigia and benefit from it. Wealth and power are his goals. To quote the Oracle from The Matrix Reloaded,
"What do all men with power want? More power."
I knew O'Brien and his dog Raymond were sniffing around my business. I didn't account for your involvement, however. That was my only mistake.
I'd say your second mistake is admitting to all this in a live video. They don't currently have any hard evidence to link you to the Terragrigia attack.
Exactly? They don't have any evidence linking him to Terragrigia, so in the meantime, he can openly taunt them about it. I mean, it's not like Chris and Jill are recording him right now.
Turns out Raymond is alive because he wore a vest. Now he gets to be the one holding people ineffectively at gunpoint.
And the reason for it is in the post-credits scene.
Jessica once again tries to shoot the guy she knows is wearing a vest. The only reason she accomplishes anything here is because Parker takes the bullet for Raymond. I guess Parker also forgot Raymond is wearing a vest and can probably take another bullet.
I don't think Parker is a mind reader, and therefore could have known where Jessica was possibly aiming. Besides, as we later come to learn, Jessica and Raymond are actually working together, so she likely was indeed aiming for a protected area. Parker, however, is unaware of this, and he thought Jessica was really trying to kill Raymond.
Don't worry about dinner. Now we're even.
The more flirty and sexy a woman is in this series, the more likely she is to be working for a bioterrorist organization.
Really? Does that apply to Alexia Ashford? Or Annette Birkin?
Game uses the same fake-out trick again by showing a ship exploding after Jessica activates a self-destruct, which turns out to be the Queen Zenobia's sister ship. However, that makes no sense because Chris and the BSAA took over that ship and there was no one on board who would activate the self-destruct.
This is why I must stress that doing your research when making videos like this is important above all else. It was actually Morgan Lansdale who remotely set off the self-destruct sequence on the Semiramis.
Now we finally have a target. Start counting, Morgan.
Not the most original last words.
You are dealing with Chris Redfield here. You want snappy one-liners, you need to get Leon on the call.
I guess now it's Leon's turn to get some of that Dartigan hate like Chris got before.
In the category of boss fights that go on way too long, I'd say this one makes the list.
It's a fucking mutated whale, son. Of course this fucker isn't going down without a fight.
This is what O'Brien is relaying to Chris and Jill about the Terragrigia attack a year ago, yet he wasn't present for this conversation.
No, Raymond was present, and he relayed that information to O'Brien, who is now passing that on to Chris and Jill.
We knew that you could end up being a liability, so we've kept video records of all of our interactions. If they go public, your life is finished.
Norman really had Morgan by the balls with that evidence. You would think he would have released it to the public after Morgan betrayed him and trapped him at the bottom of the ocean. Instead, he sat on it for a year and did nothing.
Considering that they were trapped at the bottom of the ocean without comms equipment, how exactly could have Jack exposed that evidence? Also, how do you know they did nothing? They could have likely tried to escape but could not find a way or lacked the equipment and resources to do so.
Full soon shall thou be where thine eye shall answer make to thee of this, seeing the cause which reigneth down the blast.
So did you memorize the entire book just so you could quote it verbatim?
Yes.
But sir, couldn't you have at least told us?
I couldn't risk it. Not with a mole inside the BSAA.
Everything they learned about Morgan and Terragrigia they learned from either Raymond, who was working with you, or from you just not telling them. So in the end, after everything, you had to tell them anyway. And why would you ever suspect that either Jill Valentine or Chris Redfield may be a mole who helped a man destroy a city with bioweapons? They are the last two people who would ever do that.
That's right. He's now telling them since Jessica was revealed as the traitor. And I don't think O'Brien actually suspected either Jill or Chris. However, he knew that someone in his ranks was in fact a spy. Now imagine if O'Brien did tell, for instance, Chris about the secret operation, and Chris trusted Jessica to the point that he'd reveal the plan to her of exposing Morgan's involvement. O'Brien's actions were reckless, yes, but he wanted to avoid any leaks possible as this was a high-risk gamble.
Keith and Quint, they've left us with an ace in the hole. The data analysis they sent us, the results are in. We assumed Veltro made use of 2 sister ships in the Terragrigia panic. But there was a third.
It wasn't even needed for anyone to head to the ships. The airbase where Chris started the game had the intel about the third ship, the Queen Dido, where Norman is with the evidence to put Morgan away. Had you not gotten in the way of the investigation, Chris might have found it back then.
And what about the circumstantial evidence found on the Zenobia? The one where Jill first learned that Morgan Lansdale was involved to begin with. I'd argue that's one hell of a component that made Chris and Jill realize who their real target was. Also, would you have liked if more than half the game was cut to only take place in the terminal in Finland and the final level in the Queen Dido?
Get the fuck out my face with that shit.
Bullets would no longer work after being submerged in seawater for over a year, nor would a potted plant still be growing.
Are you fucking serious?
I speak for everyone who's ever played this game when I say, fuck this boss fight. Fuck this boss fight in particular.
Get good, newbie.
Jill broadcasts the evidence straight from Norman's PDA and gets Morgan arrested, so why didn't Norman do that himself a year ago?
And how the fuck do you know that? Think about it. If Jack had communications equipment, he certainly would have exposed Lansdale a long time ago. If you were a bit more competent at your job, you'd realize that although, yes, Jill is broadcasting the crucial evidence, there's more than one way she could be doing this. She could have waited until she returned to the surface and extracted the video from Jack's PDA to then broadcast it.
They're not flying off into the sunset, but they are flying off into the distance like in every other Resident Evil game.
A staple of the series. Next.
You two were working together, but she shot to kill you, then tried to shoot you again, then blew up the ship you were on, and you two had completely opposite goals.
They were triple agents, and she didn't shoot to kill him, obviously. Also, I remember this from before.
Turns out Raymond is alive because he wore a vest. Now he gets to be the one holding people ineffectively at gunpoint.
Yet here, you are again being presented with evidence that debunks one of your crappy-ass nitpicks, and you don't make the effort to omit it. So you're getting 5 cents for feigning ignorance.
This game wants to set up intrigue for the sequel with these two, but neither of them, or any other character from this game, is in Revelations 2. Nor is anything that happened in this game relevant in the sequel. This game can't even sequel bait correctly.
Oh, is that right? Nothing in this game is relevant in the sequel, you say? Neil Fisher being the protege of Morgan Lansdale and trying to re-establish the FBC using Ouroboros? Natalia being orphaned by the Terragrigia panic, which led to Alex Wesker's interest in her inability to feel fear? Thanks for pointing me towards a future video. I'll bet that video is an epic fail just like this one was. And in the meantime, here's your trophy.
Marked off all the possible locations for the lab.
He never got the hint. What a drag.
Maybe he's already taken, Jessica.
Hey everyone, it's OmegaBlackHeart here with the 411. Like always, I gotta give a big shout out and thanks to my fans and audience who enjoy these videos. Your feedback is greatly appreciated and helps guide me to improving and making this content better. As a show of gratitude, I want to give my audience their first opportunity to choose a future video on one of 2 great games from 2018 that Dartigan has made videos on. It will be my next Everything Wrong With project after I complete my very first remaster of a video I've already done. I'll have a poll on both my channel here on YouTube and on my Instagram on Monday, August 24th of this year, where you can choose one of 2 choices. In the meantime, thanks for watching this video, stay safe, stay healthy, and take care of those around you. OBH, out.